Hi, in this video, I want to talk to you about the major maintenance reserve account in a project finance transaction. So as usual, I will also have a blog post on the same topic that I'm going to post it on my website. So we're going to talk about the major maintenance reserve account. So first of all, let's answer the question, what is a major maintenance cost? As you know, there are different type of maintenance costs involved in a project. When you're building an asset, an infrastructure asset, there are different type of maintenance. There are what we call soft maintenance costs, and these soft maintenance costs are more like regular costs. They are mainly budgeted in the annual operating expenses of the project because they are happening every year or every 6 months or every quarter. So we can include them in the O&M budget. However, there are some costs which are more like capex. They are recurring every 5 years, every 10 years. To give you a concrete example, for example, in a solar PV project, most of the time you need to replace some of the equipments like inverters every 10 years. Same thing with batteries, sometimes you have to replace them every 15 years, every 10 years, I don't remember exactly. So these are the costs that are significant costs, and they are happening, every once a year, every X year throughout the life of a project. So next question is, why do we need a maintenance reserve account for paying for this kind of cost? The reason for having a major maintenance reserve account, first of all, a major maintenance reserve account most of the time is a requirement from the bankers, from the lenders, that they ask for this reserve account. So why is that? Why there is a need to put this in place? The reason is because there is a risk, even though you have a cost that will occur 10 years down the road. However, it's a considerable cost. For example, if you have a project that is generating, let's say, 100K per year, and then all of a sudden in year 10 you have to pay 1 million for replacing some of the parts of the asset, then that will be a considerable cost, and it's going to have a lot of weight on the cash flow. So in order to smooth that out, what they require, lenders require, is to basically put money aside in a reserve account so that when we get to that time, in the points in time, there is enough money in that reserve account to pay for this cost. Okay? So just to summarize, the major maintenance reserve account is there to reduce the risk of cash shortfall to fund major maintenance expenses. And the second of all is just a requirement from the lenders. Okay? So next thing is, what are the questions that you need to ask before even you start building the major maintenance reserve account into your financial model? So the first question is, of course, you need to have the budget for major maintenance, okay? So you need to ask whoever you're getting your data from, you need to ask them what is the budget for the major maintenance cost or expenses. They might tell you that it's 1 million every 5 years, and you might want to have and use that as an input into your model. So you just put how much is the cost and how often is it happening, the frequency of the maintenance reserve account. Or what I recommend to do is to basically reflect the schedule, so it's a time-based schedule, and you're going to reflect it with the operating year 1, operating year 2, and when this expense will happen. This will give you more flexibility, and I will show it to you when we get to the Excel part of the video. After you have the major maintenance cost, the schedule, then you need to ask the question whether this major maintenance needs to be pre-funded or if it can be funded from cash from operation. And that's an important question. For example, in the example that we said 10 years down the road, you need to basically pay 1 million to replace the inverter for a solar project. Do you really need to pre-fund it as part of the construction cost? That is basically, I don't think you need to put the money aside for something that you need to pay in 10 years time, because this is going to cost you, you're going to basically draw down on debt and equity to fund that reserve account. So it's going to be cash sitting in an account and you don't use it, you use it in 10 years down the road. So for this kind of expenses that it's really, a long time, they have a long cycle, it is not recommended to pre-fund. However, what I always tell you is to provide the option and flexibility. You never know who you're dealing with. Some investment officers might come and they will say, at least we need to partially fund the major maintenance reserve account. So I would still recommend that, even though at that stage where you are, they tell you that you don't require any pre-funding of major maintenance reserve account, you still want to put the flexibility in your financial model in case, there will be a different decision a couple of months down the road. Okay? So the next question is about, when should the project start funding the major maintenance reserve account? So these are the questions that you need to, as I told you, these are the questions that you need to think about and, discuss with your team, discuss with your client. However, if you're at the beginning stage and, nobody knows what's going on and it's just all assumptions up in the air, so you can come up with the assumptions yourself. So these are the questions that I would say either you ask your clients or either you ask yourself, because these are going to be inputs into your financial model. So when should the project start funding the major maintenance reserve account? In the example that we say 10 years down the road, when do you want to when you want to start putting money aside to fund this major maintenance reserve account, or to provide for this expense that is 10 years down the road? So that's a question that you need to ask. For example, if you start putting money aside from day one, from year one, then you need to put 100K every year aside so that you can pay for that 1 million in 10 years time. Or you might decide to just fund it 3 years before, the expense is due. So these are all the things that you need to consider. And of course, you need to build flexibility in your financial model so that you can change it later on in the model. Okay? The other important question is the position of the major maintenance reserve account in the cash flow waterfall. You know that the cash flow waterfall, I have a separate video and a separate template and blog post about the cash flow waterfall, which is the most important statement in a project finance transaction. So, and as we know, it's just going to tell you the priority or the seniority of the cash flow statement. So where do these cash flows related to the major maintenance will be positioned in the cash flow waterfall? That's the important question that you need to ask yourself. Most of the time, it comes after debt service, okay? Even after debt service reserve account, that's when you can allow for the funding of the major maintenance reserve account. However, as I said, it depends from project to project. It depends on the negotiation between the different parties, so that you can just see where the position of the major maintenance reserve account is. However, as I told you, the typical one is after debt service. So that's something that you need to build into your model, and I will show you when we get to the Excel part of the video. Okay, so this is a financial model that I built for the purpose of demonstrating the major maintenance reserve account. Just 2 weeks ago, I posted a video and a blog post about the vertical layout of a project finance model. And from then on, I decided, when I am giving you and sharing with you a template, I'm going to provide you both in the horizontal, like this format here, horizontal format, and at the same time I'm also going to provide you the same thing but on the vertical format, and I'm going to let you decide which one you like the best. And I would appreciate if you can tell me which one you prefer the best. To be honest with you, up to now I would say that I am more for the vertical format, but in application I still do the horizontal one because that's what everybody is used to. Okay, so let's go back to the major maintenance reserve account. When it comes to the inputs, as I told you, I prefer to project or reflect my major maintenance expenses in my time-based inputs. So, and have it like, provide the schedule with this, because this is going to give me flexibility to change it if the needs may be. The only input that I see that is needed for modeling the major maintenance reserve account is what is the frequency of funding the major maintenance reserve account. So for example, if this is 5, meaning that the model needs to look 5 years ahead and make sure that it starts funding 5 years ahead, for the expenses that are required under the maintenance cost. Okay, so now let's get into the calculations. I have a worksheet called Major Maintenance Reserve Account, MMRA. However, it's up to you the way you want to structure your workbook. You might want to have one worksheet just dedicated to the reserve accounts. That's also common. Or you might just want to do everything, all the calculation within one worksheet. That's what we call a one-pager model. I mean, this is up to you. This is up to your preference. For this one, I have this worksheet. I call it Major Maintenance Reserve Account. So let's get started. So these are the yellow ones. These are the things that I want to calculate with you now. So the line items that I need to calculate are the funding of the Major Maintenance Reserve Account. How am I going to fund it and by how much in each model period? The second of all, when am I going to allow release from the Major Maintenance Reserve Account? And of course, I need to build the corkscrew to reflect the account, the Major Maintenance Reserve Account. Okay, so let's start with the target funding, how I want to fund the Major Maintenance Reserve Account. The input tells me that you need to fund it every 5 years. I mean, 5 years ahead of time, you need to start putting money aside to fund the expense. Okay, so if just doing it a dirty calculation, this means that I need to go and look forward 5 years, and I need to basically put money aside for this one. So 100 or let me see if I can drag it. Yes, so that's what you need to do. Okay, every 5 years you need to basically go look forward and put money. So as you can see here, by the time I get to year 5, I have the 500 that I can release it. Okay, but as we know, this is not the right way, because the model is not flexible. It's not always going to be 5 years. Tomorrow it might be you want to change, you want to make it every 3 years, every 7 years, so you want to change it and provide flexibility. So we are not going to do like this, but we're going to use a combination of the sum and offset function to do this. So we're going to start with a sum function. We're going to say sum this cell, from this cell up to, and then we're going to delete this one and start with an offset function. Okay, sum from this cell and go forward for 5 periods in the model, 5 years in this case. Okay. The model is what I have today, as you can see in this live example, is an annual model. However, I have the flexibility to change the model periodicity. Okay, so I need to consider that when I am creating the formula here. So offset. So offset, the first thing that you need to tell the offset function is what is the starting point. So that's the starting point. I might change it later, but for now we start from this cell. And we don't want to change the row, right? We don't want to go up and down. We want to go left and right. So we want to tell Excel by using the offset function to go and look forward for the cell, the 5th cell, the looking forward for 5 columns. Okay, that's what we want to tell. So we have this input here, 5. Okay. However, we want to basically, because this is 5 years, what if my model is semi-annual? So this should be 10, right? 12 divided by 6. So I have this number of months in the model period, right? So I'm going to say 12 divided by this one. Okay, you might say, why did you put 12? 12 is hard-coded. By 12, I mean the number of months in a year. I don't think the number of months in a year will change. So I don't see any problem with putting it as hard-coded. If you are sensitive and you want to just not have any hard-coded, because the model audit, their software, whatever they use, is going to pick it up. So you might just want to create a range name and say, number of days in a year. But I don't have that sensitivity for now, at least. Okay, so what this is going to do is going to look forward, okay, for 5 period, and it's going to sum it up. Come here, sum it up. Okay, so that's good. That's okay for now. And then the next step is to divide it by 5 times 12 divided by number of months in each model period. Okay, perfect. So That's perfect. So this is saying that by in year, I'm going to put 200, 100, 100, 100, 100, and 200 here. So by the time I get to, this January 2026, I have actually 600 in my account. Okay, so that's something that I might want to fix, because I want exactly 500 to be in the reserve account. I don't want to overfund it. So in order to do that, I'm going to start in the offset function one cell before, and that's going to give me exactly the 100. And now I am fine with my formula. I can copy it across. So that is now the target funding is exactly what I wanted. So I want the funding to be like funded 5 years prior to when the expense is due, and in equal installments. So just to give you why we did all the sum and offset function and all these kind of steps, is because we want to provide flexibility. Let's say that if that input was 3 instead of 5, then now you can see that the model is going to go and say, okay, so for these 2 first years, you don't need to fund anything. But when you come to year 3, you're going to fund, and this time you're going to put 1/3 of the maintenance. The previous it was 1/5. Now it's going to be 1/3, so that by the time you get to this year, when you have to spend this money, you have enough cash in your account. Okay, now that we have the target funding, the next step to find how much you need to fund is to basically look at how much cash is available. Because, okay, you want to fund 100K per year, but do you have the money for that? Is there enough cash in the accounts after you pay for all the expenses to fund this reserve account? That's when we go and have to look at the cash flow waterfall. Let's see cash flow waterfall here. I already have it. So as you can see here, this is the money coming in, the revenues that the project is generating. So the money that the revenues that are coming, the cash that is coming, is going to be first used to pay for the operating expenses and the major maintenance expenses. And then it's going to be used to pay for the debt and interest on the senior lenders. Okay, they are also in priority. After we pay for all this, whatever money is left, we can use it to fund this major maintenance reserve account. So whenever I want to fund the major maintenance reserve account in my model, I need to come and check with this line called cash flow available for major maintenance reserve account. So I'm going to bring this in my major maintenance reserve account calculation. And what's going to go in the model as funding of major maintenance reserve account is going to be the minimum of this line and what is target. Okay, so that's basically what is going to go into my model as the funding of, although this is the target, but what goes, you need to just have the simple check with the availability, cash availability. When I have the minimum, I always put the maximum of so that I make sure that if it is negative for whatever reason, there is no negative funding of the major maintenance reserve account. It doesn't make any sense. The last thing that we need to calculate is the release from the major maintenance reserve account. When do we want to allow release from major maintenance reserve account? Of course, you're going to release it when you need it, meaning that when you need to spend money on the maintenance, right? So you're going to say you're going to spend the money when you have any expense. So you're going to link it to your maintenance cost, and you're going to fund it from the beginning balance and whatever you have funded in that period. Okay, so this is gonna, if it works fine, in year 5 it's going to release it, so that as you can see the account. So we start funding, we start putting money aside, money aside, money aside, and when we come to year 5, we're going to release all of it, and we're going to fund the major maintenance. The same thing for the other years as well. Okay, so once we have done this calculation, these two lines is going to go into our cash flow waterfall, and this line is going to go to our balance sheet, and we are done with modeling the major maintenance reserve account. This is going to be flexible, and the whole thing that we did with the periodicity, for example, if I come and change my model periodicity to, let's say, semi-annual, if I come and look at the major maintenance, you will see that this is going to be basically adjusted to that as well. I guess I made one mistake. Let me see what I did as a mistake. Okay, I made a stupid mistake that I needed to just put this in brackets. Okay, so just correcting it with you now, and then we will have this perfect. So now you can see that it's 50, 50, 50 for 10 periods, which means 5 years, 10 semi-annual periods, 5 years. And by the time you get to this year, you have enough cash sitting in your account so that you can pay for this expense. So the same thing I can do now. I can put it, on monthly basis. Let's go crazy. And if I go to my major maintenance, you see that now it is putting 8,000, 8,000, 8,000 until it has enough cash sitting, to pay for this expense here. Okay, last thing I want to show you is the vertical layout. In the vertical layout, I'm using the same inputs. I have again a worksheet called MMRA for major maintenance reserve account, and I do the same calculations. As you can see, the combination of sum and offset, but this time I need to be careful and look for, change the columns instead of change the rows instead of columns in my offset function. And the rest are the same. It's just the design is different, and yeah. So that's it for me. If you like this type of content, I post every week, most of the time. So please consider subscribing, and hope to see you in my next video. Thank you and bye. If you want to learn how to build better financial models, check out my online course on financial model spreadsheet design at courses.phoenixmode.com.